Right. Hello. We should be live doing a little solo recording today. So bear with me through the technical problems that we're going to encounter. But been getting a lot of questions from folks on uh, how do I build with AI? How do I get started? How do I do stuff? So I've talked a little bit about on the podcast before. I guess Andrew Newman, for those of you who don't know me, um, and I have a podcast on creativity, and we talk a lot about building and doing. And so I've talked about this app that I've built with AI. It's on the Apple App Store today. It's a podcast app. It's called YourPods. I was doing some work today on it, and I figured, I get a lot of questions on how do we build with AI? What do I want to do? That sort of stuff. So we're just going to do some stuff. Before I jump into that, I put in the description of the video, there's some tools that you might need. So, YourPods is a podcasting app that's built for iOS and the Apple ecosystem. So, Mac, it will work on Mac OS, work on iOS, has CarPlay capabilities. Apple TV supports actually in beta. So if you want to go test it out today, you can. We'll cover all that. But there's some additional tools you might need, and I'll walk through my setup and why I'm using those tools. So you don't have to scramble to download if you're watching live. If you have them, great. If not, you can start doing it. I'll do a little bit of an intro, and then we'll jump in. We're going to build a feature. Presumably, it'll work. If it doesn't work, it could be a long live stream, but we'll get it working, and then you'll be able to see it in the App Store. Usually, it takes Apple a couple days to approve stuff. It can be a few hours. It can be some weeks. Sometimes, just depends. But generally, it's a couple days. Um, yeah. So Your Pods, again, it's a podcast app, and it's built in a couple with a couple different technologies. So it's built with a technology called Flutter, and it's based on Dart. And what that is it's a bunch of pre-built libraries and a bunch of I guess I should also say I'm going to gloss over a lot of different stuff. This isn't a guide or like a how-to, a step-by-step, but hopefully, as you're trying to get your stuff set up and as you're trying to get things to work, that's a big part of building. That's a big part of working with code or technology in general. You'll have kind of a, a known point in time that you're trying to match. Um, and so you have to install some stuff again, and then we'll get through that. Why I use Flutter? I use Flutter intentionally because it's a abstraction layer. There's a bunch of pre-built libraries and things you can leverage. You don't have to build everything from scratch. And the other nice thing about Flutter is that it makes it fairly easy to cross-compile the application across iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, Linux, and a bunch of other, Apple Watch, CarPlay, Android Auto. They have a lot of code already out there that you can leverage. And the idea behind this from the beginning was always going to be open source. And what open source means is that you can see the code. You can grab the code yourself. You can modify it. You can run it on your own iPhone. You could run it on a Linux computer, a Windows computer, Mac, whatever you want to do. So I wanted it to be as easy as possible for folks to try to adapt to different use cases. Web, for example, you could build a web player if you wanted. And also confine a lot of the hard problems that you encounter when trying to build stuff for either native iOS or native Android or Mac or Windows or Linux, that kind of thing. It also helps the AI uh, get constrained a little bit as well. So, a lot of times in development, we talk about constraints. What are your limitations? What are you trying not to do sometimes? And so, it really helps to say, oh, hey, here's some stuff that is already existing. Let's leverage that. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll figure out our way to build through it. There's other software you'll need. Again, I'm assuming this is on Mac. There's no reason this shouldn't work on other platforms. It's not tested and designed for that, so you might run into problems, but by all means, go for it. Xcode, which is Apple's development environment. You don't strictly need that. It makes it a little bit easier to run test versions in the emulator, which I'll cut over to in a second here. We can kind of talk through some of that. CocoaPods is a bunch of, again, frameworks and libraries that are used to build Apple iOS applications. I use a tool called Anti-Gravity. It's a Google tool. Claude Code is out there. You can do the same thing with that. There's other coding tools that exist, Cursor, those types of things. It's not an endorsement for anti-gravity. I prefer the tool myself, and I'll talk a little bit about why I prefer it and how I work. Matches pretty well with how the tool is actually designed to work. So it was a good fit for me. And we'll talk about how like refining in plain English versus having to refine in code or refactor in code is super helpful. I believe it's free as well. If you have a Google account, a Gmail account, or whatever, you should be able to get it. They give you access to the AI for free. There's of course limits and stuff. I was using it for free for a long time before I started hitting the limits, and decided to pay. So again, you probably won't have to pay if you want to do just some simple stuff. If you hit the limits, you can decide whether or not you want to. But theoretically, you can download the code for free. If you already have the computer or the Mac, you can install the stuff and build your own app or build a feature in this app or something else. So I'm going to switch over here to Andrew and screen, and you should see my screen hopefully, and a little picture of me. I'm waiting for the stream to update so that we can do that. Cool. All right. I can see myself. So what is YourPods? So again, this is the app. I'm just in a simulator. You can get this through Xcode. And at its core, oops, doing live demo. That's how you know it's real. It's a podcasting app that supports a service called gPodder Sync. And so this isn't super important because we're going to get around this limitation for folks as part of the feature build. But gPodder Sync is just an open protocol that people use to sync podcasts across different devices or different operating systems or whatever. A lot of podcast apps that you have, if you use different devices, they have a sync built in. You usually have an account you sign up for, that sort of thing. So this allows you to host your own sync client and do podcasting. Today, we're actually going to build a feature so that you don't have to have a sync client. You can just use the app on your device. So if you go to a different device, the data is not going to follow you. Your progress and stuff won't follow you. That's all part of the sync. But if you want to just download the app and use it, you can. Maybe we'll develop some more features on that in the future. So otherwise, just a pretty basic podcast app, right? We don't have any subscriptions in here. Sometimes in the emulator, you'll run into bugs. That's all part of the development process. So we'll do that. We'll get the library here. So I have this no agenda, so I don't endorse this. I was just using this for live transcript feature development. So there's no endorsement there. 3.8 I highly endorse. That's the podcast you're listening to right now. So yeah, you can go in, you can click play a podcast. There's some bugs with the emulator, so you should see chapters and that kind of stuff here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's a whole thing you'll find out as you do this. But yeah, so that's the gist of it, right? So that's the app. In the description of the video, there is the website for GitHub. So again, I'm going to try to stay really high level on this, but I'm going to assume that people don't really have a strong idea of what we're doing or how to do this, and then try to extrapolate again to give people kind of benchmarks as you're developing yourself. I fully expect you to struggle to get the environment set up. I fully expect you to struggle to get started. That kind of stuff just happens as part of the development process. And so AI can help you with that. And I highly recommend that. Obviously, searching and hitting your head against the wall a bunch of times is kind of the par for the course. But the link is up there. So it's github.com/secretcompany/YourPods-source. And so this is open, free to the public. Again, this is the exact version that's in the App Store today. You'll see that it's actually the App Store release 1.3. I put that up about an hour ago. That is submitted to the App Store. It's going through the process. So if you're looking now, you'll see the previous version. Again, it takes a day or two, sometimes more, sometimes less, to get it approved through Apple. But this is the release that will be in the App Store, any day, any minute. And if you don't know what GitHub is a service that allows you to host the code that is built to run the app. And so if you're not super technical, like you can do this. It's gonna take some time. You're gonna have to persevere through it and find all sorts of problems. But with between AI and some hard work and some time, I think you'll be able to get it done. So these are all the files that make the app. We don't need to, get into the details. If you really want to dive in, again, this is a standard Flutter Dart project. Um, you can use a search engine. You can Google it, ask AI, and we'll talk a little bit through how to use AI to even understand some of this stuff. If you really want to dive in and explore, by all means do that. But the focus of this again is to not dive into every single little detail, but to kind of give you some benchmarks so that you can get started if you want and kind of work through it. This is just kind of a README, a boilerplate of all the different features, some of the technical information. There's a little bit of information in here on if you want to build it on Linux. And then again, the license. So again, this is open source. I would ask just as a favor, if you do download this, build some cool stuff, contribute it back into um, the repository with a pull request. We'll take a look at it, and if it's something that we think was good for everyone, we'll add it in. If you want to just build your own stuff and keep it for yourself, more than happy to do that. So to get the code, all you do is click on the little code button here and just download as a zip. Wait a few seconds. It's not super big, but that's pretty much it. I'll open the folder here, and again, this will work anywhere Dart is. I think maybe just a quick, I don't know why we're having some kind of a bug here. That's how we know it's real, right? Yeah, you're seeing the screen, and that's actually in a virtual machine, something called UTM. I use it a lot. I don't know if I would say it's an endorsement, but it's a great project. It's open source, works really well. And I use that for development for a few different reasons. You don't have to use a virtual machine. It does sometimes complicate things just a little bit. You can just install this on your Mac if you want. So there's a little, you'll see some kind of oddity stuff because I'm just running a virtual machine in a window. But yeah, so we open up our source, and then this is, again, everything we just saw on the website. And if you want to just kind of open it up and start playing and get the emulator over here, the simulator, you can come in here, just go to the iOS folder, go to the runner.xc workspace. It's the white one, not the blue one. You just double click on that. It'll open in Xcode, assuming that you have. So it's going to ask you, do you trust it? You shouldn't trust an open code that you're not aware of. I built this, so I trust it. I would recommend you trust it. And so, yeah, this is just the standard Xcode window. Again, this isn't really a tutorial, but you'll see in here, there's all sorts of information about it. You can click run, and you'll see that it's build failed. So there's something here called signing as part of the Apple process. You have to have a signing certificate to run the app in Xcode or distribute it to the App Store. It's not my rules, it's how they run. So you're going to run into issues as I did here because all the signing and stuff doesn't get included in the repo. The good news is I put a link to the developer pages on how to set that up for yourself. So you can set it up. I think you have to have a developer account. I believe it's free to get a self-signed certificate so you can play around with it. But that's part of the struggle. And I would offer AI as a really good use to get all that set up if you need. The other part of this is that because it's built with a thing called Flutter, there's a lot of build stuff you have to do in the background to get it compiled and ready to go. And so once you get Flutter installed, you'll actually have to come in this folder and do a Flutter build iOS or Flutter build IPA, which will actually build all the files and stuff to get it working. But once you get there, we're going to use some movie magic. I'll just come over here. And I already obviously have this project already set up. We're going to go into the project that I have set up today. And then the reason I'm doing this and not just coming out of the open source version is that as soon as I'm done building this feature, I'm going to submit it to the App Store. And, again, within a few hours or days, it'll be available. So then, if you got downloaded anti-gravity, you just open the workspace, just file, open folder. You go to that folder you downloaded, and then you're here. And so I have some other stuff configured, so it won't be exact like everything else, but you have your little explorer over here. This is all the files in that folder. You can search. There's all sorts of stuff here. There's plugins for anti-gravity. If you're familiar with something like VS Code or Visual Studio Code, anti-gravity is very similar to that. But it's designed for AI development first. And so I'll just ask it. I got away from my keyboard to wake up, but one of the things, so you'll maybe just to orient folks, so your file browser is here. These are all the files you have. So if you want to open stuff, like I have the pubsec.yaml, which is where what all the different packages and stuff are, and then also how you change the version of the app, that kind of stuff. You can edit it in here. It's an editor just like you would. And then you have this agent window. And this is how you interact with the AI. There's a few different ways to work with AI in anti-gravity. I'm just going to kind of try to stick to this because you can kind of see how stuff is changing as it changes stuff. But there's agentic workflows and that kind of stuff you can do, which is kind of more advanced stuff. I recommend everybody try it out. But I want to try to keep it simple enough so that you could hopefully just download this and get going at home. So I'll ask it, what is this app? All right, and hopefully that's legible, but I'm just gonna say, what is this app? What are the key features? I wanna build a new feature today live on YouTube. So we'll send that off, and it'll take, sometimes it'll take hours, sometimes it'll take minutes. This shouldn't take too long because it's a pretty simple request, but what you're seeing here now is the AI agent is looking through. So when you ask it something, it's gonna think, and it's gonna, try to figure out what that means. So you'll see that it's referencing Gemini.md. So I already have a Gemini file for the Gemini model in this project, and it'll do a bunch of stuff. I don't include that in the open source version. I probably should. I either don't think there's anything secret in there. But that's going to help ground what it's asking for, but it's going to tell you what it's doing. It's going to look at some stuff. So we can see here that it's looking at the project. So this would be wherever you download your file to, YourPods dash, I think it downloads as, what does it download as? Source main. Again, you can call this stuff anything you want, doesn't really matter. And then it's going to come and tell us. So it's YourPods is a cross-platform, privacy-focused podcast player built with Flutter. Good job, Gemini. It puts users in control of their data by syncing with gPodder compatible services like Nextcloud rather than proprietary cloud. So it probably read the README. You could read the README as well, but it's gleaned that from looking at the code, but also the README. As you'll see here, it analyzed the folder of code. It kind of told us what it's doing, and then it also pulled up the roadmap file as well. Key features. I think this is all very accurate. In the last version, or I guess the current version, the 1.3 version, we refactored a bunch of audio libraries because there was issues with Bluetooth crashing and some other crazy stuff. So we fixed all that up. I'm happy that it thinks we have a modern tech stack. And so let's build a feature live based on the roadmap. Here's some stuff that I've kind of roadmapped out for feature development. So it's gonna learn, and you're gonna get context over time. So if you're doing this at home or you're doing this for the first time, it's probably not gonna have these features. It might come up with some features based on what you're doing. You could say, we could do a little feature development live and say, so I'll say, those are cool, but I want a feature that'll make this more personalized to me. It'll go, it's going to spin through here and it's going to come up with something. This is where I think a lot of people get hung up on AI because it will come up with an output, right? It will find a solution, if you would, for what I asked, but it has no idea what personalized to me means. It's going to take an approximation around that. And so, as you see here, it's going through some stuff. It's looking through. It's going to come up with. I would assume it's going to come up with some features that allow you to customize views or something along those lines. And maybe that's what you want. But that's not really the power of this kind of environment. And that's not really the power of AI. So we see it's kind of spitting some stuff out here. Some of the I don't know if you can hear, I will set it up so it dings when it's done, because I'll let this run sometimes, and sometimes it takes quite a long time to finish. Most of the stuff we're doing today should be pretty quick. But yeah, so smart mixes, rules-based personalization. And so it's going to break down, kind of why you would this in a typical software environment. This could be the team pitching a product manager. This could be a product manager pitching the team. This could be, it's kind of a user story / pitchy kind of thing. Episode bookmarks and clips. That's a cool thing. Like it's brought this up multiple times. App theme and icons. So what it's done is, because I didn't give it enough specificity, it's just kind of broadly decided what personalization might mean. And frankly, those are all pretty good things. Like you could just say, yeah, go ahead, build it and do that. But that's not what I want to do today. So I'm going to start a new chat or a new conversation. And so the conversations within anti-gravity are pretty good, and they really help break down the context window problem. So there's only so much memory that an AI can look at. Its tokens, input, limits, all this kind of stuff. So what I find is that the best way that I find to work with this is that if you're working through a specific thing, to keep it in a specific conversation. And you can branch outside of that, but as the further down the line you get, or the more you're building and developing, the wackier stuff tends to get. So try to keep it in a specific feature, in a conversation, run it, build it, test it, make sure that it works. And then if you're going to do something very different or divergent, then spin up a new conversation. You have to kind of start over a little bit again, but it'll tend to give you a better result. And again, we're ignoring multi-agent workflows and all this other kind of more advanced stuff. Anyone at home should be able to just do this. And again, if you don't want to build a podcast app specifically or build on this, you don't have to. You can download Anti-Gravity today and cook up something from scratch. That's what I did with this. I said, I want to build a podcast player. I gave it some more specific criteria, things like using Flutter, some examples of user flows that I wanted, some high-level details, how to build a plan, and go. So we'll start a new conversation. And again, you'll see your previous chats down here. There's a couple different phases, planning and fast. Fast is just kind of like make it happen, go do it. I don't recommend that starting out. The planning is great. And this is one of the reasons I really love anti-gravity, and we'll see in a second what that actually means. You have different model choices depending upon the plan you have. I find the Gemini models are pretty great for code. They're pretty great for planning and structure. Debugging, they tend to be okay with. The Claude models, Claude, especially 4.6, is really great at code. I wouldn't get too caught up on the best model or the different use cases of the models. Gemini Pro is more than good enough to get started on a basic app. And again, you start small, give it detail, build out. And so for this, we'll just use that. And the feature that I want to build, again, we say, so we launch the app, and when you launch the app for the first time, you get blank because you don't have an account here. And so we have to go to add an account. And so you'll see this, it's gPod or sync only. And so you come in here, you give it the Nextcloud that you're hosting or you're renting, username and password for that. There's some interface settings and stuff down here we don't need to get into. But one thing I really want to do is, again, if you don't have a Nextcloud or you don't have a gPod or sync service, I want you to be able to just use the app. Again, syncing won't work. It'll work only on your device, but most people listen to podcasts on their phone. They don't maybe have other devices or don't want to. So that's a kind of a limited use case feature, and it's something that I'm planning to build on in the future. But to get started, let's just build a feature that allows you to either create an account through this, what we would call user flow, or develop a new flow where you don't have to have an account to get started. You can just have what we'll call a local device account that will allow you to subscribe to podcasts and that kind of stuff, have a queue, work with the watch, play it in the car, that kind of stuff, but won't sync through other devices. It's pretty divergent from the app. So this could be a very interesting chain of events here, but we'll see what happens. And so I'm going to take a second here to write some information, as I guess is a prompt. Again, I'm going to try to keep it mimicable, but I'll walk you through after I write it why I did certain things and why I might not have done other things. And I'm also kind of assuming, again, you're probably not coming from a software background, or maybe you've dabbled a little bit. We don't need to get super advanced and have a bunch of information in there to have high impact with AI. It helps, especially the more complicated stuff you do. But for a quote unquote simple feature like this, we shouldn't need to get too crazy, but we'll find out. Okay, so I wrote, I want to add the ability for a user to create an account without the requirement of having a sync server, basically a local app account so that they can listen to podcasts on the device. We need to keep all the existing features for folks with a sync account. This will be a separate user flow. Once we build it, we want to make sure as many features work between the two types of accounts as possible. Outline the features. I have a typo. That will work between account types. We want to keep the add flow similar, but give the option for local account and not require syncing to function. So I've repeated myself a few different times. One, I haven't really thought about what I'm writing. This is all kind of impromptu. But two, I do find that reinforcing core things as you write to the AI does help really reinforce what's the most critical things. And so again, when I say like account flow, this is the account creation flow. So adding an account, we have this pop-up. I didn't tell it anything about that. I didn't really specify that much detail. So I'm giving the AI a lot of leeway to make those determinations. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through and build a plan, and then we'll look at the plan. So I'm not super worried right now. If you've used other AIs or other AI coding tools, sometimes they just go and build stuff. Sometimes they'll just kind of sit there and help you, and it's expecting you to do stuff. This workflow is a little bit different, which is, again, one of the reasons I like it. Typically giving it an outcome, and so saying like how the user flow should work is really good to do, and also kind of required. And if you're from a software background, that's more like writing a user story. And I think I'm not going to do that to see what it does. But normally I would recommend probably another line of something telling it that from the new user screen, when I click add account, I want to give the option to pick a GPod or sync account or a local account with no syncing, something like that. And again, traditional software development, this is where you're working with designers, engineers, you're having these types of conversations. Maybe the designer is working through the flow, or the product person will. Sometimes an engineer will pitch it. But these are the kind of details that you would normally have to define in coding. And I find that it's a little bit of an art, but you can omit a lot of stuff because it just knows those standard patterns. Sometimes you get wacky things. So we're going to hit send and see what happens. And because I have it on planning, it's going to go through here and process. It's again, because we started a new chat, it's going to go through and kind of redo a lot of the stuff that we saw last time. So now it's telling us what it's doing. I'm starting the exploration of code base to understand the allowing access. So I have it set as it's exploring. It's going to be asking me for permission to do different things. So I just click through really quick there so it can keep going. But that is building us a task here, and it's going to do this in real time. So it's basically planning out all the different types of tasks that it thinks it needs to do in order to build the thing that we just asked it to do. So I'm just going to quick glance at this. Like so far, this looks, I think, pretty good. I think we've hit the core things. Yeah, so we'll let it keep spinning here and keep going. So as we start building too, if it has to run different types of commands, I have it set to ask that. I highly recommend keeping that, especially in the beginning. You might not know what stuff is. You can always deny the request and then ask it to tell you what it means, or sometimes denying the command also forces it to take a different approach. And so you see here, the implementation plan is done. We can ignore a lot of what's going on here in the chain of thought. It is helpful sometimes to come back through here. I typically don't spend a lot of time in this, but also if you're just generally curious, it does a pretty good job of explaining like, here's the 4 things that it thinks it needs to do. You can expand it, and then you can start to dive in to see like, what is it actually doing in the code? Again, if you don't know what any of this means, that's okay. You can always ask it too and say, hey, on step 4, exploring the code base to understand auth and data persistence, like, what does that mean? How does that, how do you do that? Or, so you can kind of converse with it if you want. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. I also have it set up to ask me to proceed before it starts going. So I'm going to take a quick look at this. We'll make some comments. And this is one of the cool features with anti-gravity that I like so much, and other coding platforms do this as well. But we have the task. So this is basically the plan that it's going to follow as it does stuff once we tell it to go. So I just quick look at it here. So add local account support, explore the code base for auth and persistence. So it kind of did that. It'll check stuff off actually as it goes to, which is kind of cool. These are where the logic for the different auth services are, the screens. So this is considered a screen. This is considered a screen. So it's looking at how does it look today. Define local user state. So that's great. We didn't really define it too much. I gave it basically contraindications of saying we don't want it to sync or need to sync, but I didn't really define what else local means, like how we're going to store stuff. Should we store stuff? We have the ability to download files in the app. Is that going to work? I don't know. In a traditional software environment, these are the kinds of things we would be going through in more of a planning or discovery phase. With AI, I find having knowledge and awareness of that kind of stuff definitely helps. If you want to be more complete, you could definitely define a big old PRD or a big old plan. I prefer to go iterative and move much faster. And so I'm kind of rolling the dice to see if those kind of things work. Um, you can accommodate those with test plans. You can test them yourself. There's all sorts of ways to mitigate those types of problems. But again, if you're just getting started, you don't need to burden yourself with all these like edge case problems, because you're going to discover along the way that, oh, I can't download audio now. What do I do? Well, you can work through that problem with AI. And this is, I think, a paradigm shift that a lot of people in the industry are still trying to kind of work through and figure out. But a lot of people who aren't used to building software or used to industries where planning or substantial planning is very much required, it isn't required so much anymore. It's not to say it doesn't help and that you can't or shouldn't do it, but I'm trying to see like what we'll actually do for also a little bit of an interest of the demo. So we're going to find that. We're going to outline data persistence strategy for local only. And that's good. Feature parity limitations. So that's probably going to be in the implementation plan. We're going to create that plan. So I guess it didn't update the tasks, but we're actually here. So we drafted that plan. We're going to review it with user. That's what we'll do next. And then this is what it thinks it needs to do before we approve the plan. And so once we look at the plan, we probably add some comments. It might change this stuff, but phase one, auth on, okay. Data persistence improvements if needed. That's a good catch. Like it probably doesn't need to do a lot because of the way that it's designed today. We're using all of the Flutter local storage stuff. So in theory, all of that stuff will just work. In practice, we'll find out if it actually does all the changes it needs to or not. Verification. So it's coming up with how do we know if it worked. Test onboarding as a local user, and then test core features, subscribe, download, play. I would say, yes, these are the core features that I would expect to work. And then, of course, adding local user, depending upon the paths that it takes and the access that you give it, it might be able to test this for you. In the iOS ecosystem, things get a little complicated, but yes, it can work. Other types of apps you're building, a lot of times you can have the AI just do this for you. So this is just kind of its task list. And if you're working with an engineer, they would probably do something similar. Maybe you're doing like Jira stories. There's all sorts of ways to kind of plan this out, but this is kind of the checklist. So, and again, this is the implementation plan. So this is the plan that it develops. This is what it's going to do. I love this part of anti-gravity. This is huge. Like as a product manager, this is a lot of what I would do. This is a pseudo PRD. It kind of crosses a little bit into more of a technical document. And so we don't need to get lost in all those features, but you can always ask it if you don't know what stuff means. So implementation plan, local account support. The goal is to allow users to use YourPods without a GPod or server sync. This involves creating a local account type that bypasses server sync logic while retaining all local functionality, subscriptions, playback history, etc. I will say that there is a lot of, in the last version, we put out 1.3, there's a lot of caching improvements we've made. So in the event that you don't have network or you're on an airplane or something like that. So a lot of that groundwork is already built in there. But interesting to see if it keeps it. And also it should be easier in theory. Important backup. Local accounts will not back up to any server. If the user deletes this app or loses their device, everything is gone. We should consider adding an import-export feature, but it's out of scope for this task. So that's awesome. So it's already thinking ahead of I've used the app, I really love it, but I want to actually move to an app where I can have a sync feature, or maybe I want to export all of my stuff so that I can do kind of like an old school backup and like have a file of all my settings, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a cool thing, but it's also smart enough to say, well, you didn't ask for it, so we're not going to do it. This would be a great opportunity if that's something you would want to add. All you got to do is highlight it, add a comment, and say, make a plan for this, or yeah, let's do that in phase 2 or something. I'm not going to do that because we're going to do a better feature in the future, but import export is coming. Sync features like sync to watch, push pull server, and listening stats, which rely on server history, will be disabled or limited for local accounts. That's interesting. So obviously push and pull to the server. There's no server, so that's not going to happen. Listening stats. So the way that it works today in the app is that we calculate all those stats from the server, and it's all calculated on device in a private way. It doesn't go out to the internet or anything. So that makes sense because there are no server stats. We could amend that feature for the local accounts if we wanted, and we could say, what would it take to keep an account history? What would it keep? I'll just write it. So I need AI to help me spell. But so I'll just add that as a comment if you've ever worked in Google Docs or Microsoft Word docs with comments. That's basically what we're doing here. And as you see, when I added that, there's a proceed with the little comment, or I can send it. And what that'll do then is it'll take all my comments, refactor as needed, and then either move forward if I didn't give it some specific instructions, or it's going to come back and refactor and ask for additional clarification. The sync to watch is a little interesting because that should not require. Don't quote me on it. I'm just thinking through how it's built. I don't think that it should require a sync account. It should just sync out of the queue. So I'll ask. So I said doesn't. So I asked it a question, and then I also said we should support this if it doesn't work. So we'll see what it comes up with. But so these are great. The more complicated you're asking, or the more information you give it, the more parameters, the more kind of feedback it'll ask. Or if you're asking for things that are not straightforward, like if you just started an app today and said, give me a local podcast app that I don't need any accounts for, make it. You'll probably get something, and it'll probably not work super well. It might work. Go ahead and try it, but your mileage is going to vary. So proposed changes, this is telling us the different files and then what it's going to do in there. If you don't understand the code, you don't understand this stuff, you don't necessarily need to worry about it. Again, you can always ask it what it means. And so I'm going to just review this. And this is when I say like AI code, this is typically what I'm doing. And I'm going to look at basically the gist of what it's planning to do. And if I see something that doesn't look good, or maybe we need to get some edge case analysis in there, I'll do that. But I don't typically, for this product, I haven't really had to write any code. When I do this for other work, sometimes I'll have to just go in and write stuff. A lot of times it's faster to just tell it what it didn't do or what it needs to do differently and have it iterate on it itself. So let me just read through this real quick to make sure it's not going to do anything too crazy. So this is a good one. And so I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. So will these be encrypted locally? Like it should, as long as it's following our standard schema. But we'll ask. And so this is, again, an example. You can just ask it questions about what it's doing here. So this has the possibility to break stuff for us, since the API calls are required for server sync. So when we build this, we'll want to test to make sure that the server profiles still work and we don't break anything. And so I'll just reinforce that there. And then maybe actually what I'll do too is like, and so if you can't read that, I said, let's make sure you test this before we're done. So I wanted to call out that we definitely don't want to break syncing for accounts that require syncing. And so what the syncing does is it syncs your play position. It'll sync the episodes you have, your listen status, if you've listened or not. It'll sync the different podcasts you're subscribed to and some other stuff. So we want to make sure that continues to work in the app, right? Preference, logic screens. Okay, so cool. So this is again, we were talking about screens. This is the concept of a screen in Flutter Dart. And so this is what it's going to do. So it's going to add create local account button to the initial setup add account view. So it should be this. So it should, I guess, say add an account or add local account. It's going to hide the fields. That'll be interesting. It should theoretically work. Sometimes you'll find that it says it'll hide things and it'll hide things, but then they're still required. So that'll be fun, kind of fun to test to see how it turns out. Normally I'd probably flag that in here, but we'll see what it does. If local is true, push this through. Oh, cool. So it's coming in here and in our interface settings, there's this is the cache, the local cache for the episodes and stuff. Background app refresh, how long it's going to take. But then we have down here, we have push to server, pull from server. So this allows you to force a sync effectively with the app. So if your app has a bunch of information the server doesn't, that you can hit the push server. It'll push what's on the device to the server and vice versa, pull from server. But you don't need that if you have a local account, right? And same for the sync interval. So the sync interval up here is how often the app will sync to the server. And you don't need that if it's a local account. So it's kind of anticipating the ramifications downstream of doing this, right? So we don't need to present users with local accounts a bunch of crap that they can't even configure anyway, or if they did configure, it doesn't change anything. And so normally in a user flow, you'd have to map all this out, or maybe that it's a small enough change like this where the team can just kind of do it. But you tend to forget stuff once in a while and that kind of thing. And so it's really cool to see that it picked up on that. Again, I didn't really give it that much context. Update the UI to distinguish between accounts. That's cool. Look at that different icon for on the badge. So I'm assuming it'll be here. We'll see what it does. Kind of interested to see what it comes up with. Automated tests. We have some tests already built. It looks like it's going to try to build some tests. And then the manual verification steps are kind of cool. These are usually pretty good, to be honest, like especially for this app specifically. The more complicated stuff you build, or if you're building outside of this, it might be not so good. But in my experience with this universe, it's been pretty great. Cool. So again, you can add anything in here. I'm going to just flip over and see if anyone has any comments. We're going to just send it off. So we see again, we have review. I can add any more comments if I want. I'll hit proceed. And so what it's going to do now is it's going to come back through all the different comments that I made, and then flip it over to the implementation plan if there's other stuff. And so again, you don't have to look at this kind of stuff. I will, as just kind of talk through this on the stream as it's going. But so it's telling you, and I want to be clear on this stuff too. It says thought. It's not thinking, right? It's a set of algorithms. It's gleaning nuance and intention. And that's just a human word that we have to describe the process of what it's doing. So it's doing a bunch of analysis in the background. But it uses first person. It just don't at me. So it's looking at the feedback. I'm specific exploring feasibility. It gets a little pedantic sometimes too. But it looks like it's looking at the different things we've called out. I said I really want the watch stuff. So it's looking at the watch, making sure that the API is syncing, that kind of stuff. So it's doing some refactoring. It updated some stuff. And so then this will give you kind of a high level progress update of what it's been doing. Local state, we can support this. So cool. So I asked it if we can do stats still, and we can. So it's going to do that apparently. We'll work out of the box. So it was wrong, right? So it said watch probably wouldn't work. This document also will update as AI updates it. So you can gaslight yourself sometimes being like, I'm pretty sure the doc said this. It just overwrites it. So just be aware of that. I think that's actually the way that it should work, but it might it might throw you a couple times until you figure that out. But it told us that the Apple Watch stuff wasn't probably like features like sync to watch and listening status will be disabled or limited for local accounts. But then it says here that it will. So again, the danger of building this kind of stuff without knowing what you're doing is you're exposing yourself to all sorts of different bugs and coding implementations. If you're building from scratch, I highly recommend having another agent or doing another window up here once you've built some. Have it go through and say what kind of security vulnerabilities might be here, or what's the attack surface, or what should I be concerned about if I release this app? And we can maybe do a little bit of that later too if there's some time. But it can be wrong. And so it's really good, but it can be wrong. And so just to be aware, if you're building apps for yourself or building apps for others, you're exposing yourself or others to possible issues. And the news is full of this stuff. So I don't want to scare people into not doing it. You just need to be aware of that. And if you're going to put any sort of sensitive information in here, I don't think podcasts are super sensitive, and your listening history might be personal and you might not want that to leak. And I don't want it to leak for my app, but it's also not the end of the world, right? We're not storing credit card information in the app. And so I'm not worried about that kind of stuff. Funny enough, security is the next one. Confirmed all profiles are encrypted storage. Remember, I asked it, are we going to store this encrypted? Gemini, Claude both do really, really well at those kind of standard things, although sometimes they'll take shortcuts and they'll say it's just easier to store the credentials in a file that's not encrypted on the app to make it work. So you got to be careful, but so it says it's going to do it. I don't believe it's going to do testing. I just don't think it can, but it says it's going to, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'll just kind of skim through this. It looks like it's added maybe a couple things, but nothing too crazy. It's more just confirming with me what I said. So again, if I saw something in here I didn't like, or I'm thinking of something else, I can come back in here easily, add a comment and go. So I'll just proceed. This might be a good time to talk about Git again. So we downloaded this from GitHub. That's a service that allows you to host code. There's a software also called Git, which is what GitHub is largely built on, which allows you to make checkpoints or save different versions of your code as you go. And so instead of just saving over, like if you save a document and it just saves over, it'll keep a history of that, so you can kind of go back in time if something doesn't work. And so I usually recommend doing a commit before you do this kind of stuff. Again, I don't want people to get trapped in lingo. This little thing over here, source control. There's a bunch of different stuff in here. You don't need to worry about it. You'll see the core. And what it'll do is it'll tell you what's changing as stuff is being changed. And so you can go take a look at it too, and you can see what the file was. And so it'll tell you. So the red line here is what I deleted earlier, and the green line here, or the yellow line, depending on your color vision, is what changed. I can come in here and change it back, or I can say, actually, don't do that. So again, this gives you kind of the three windows into your files up here. You can search stuff. This is your source control. I highly recommend looking at this. If you don't know how to do any of this stuff too, you can ask your agent in Gemini and say, hey, I want to make sure that this folder is Git compatible. Help me set up Git. And if you don't have it, it'll try to do it for you. If you have it limited or need to go get some stuff, it'll tell you, hey, I can't do this, can't do that. It's asking me for permission to the walkthrough, so it looks like it's done already. That's cool. But so anyway, and then you can hit different versions of this through time. And so I don't want to get into a whole big Git thing. I'm also using Git work trees. That's a whole nother thing you don't need to worry about, but I want to be transparent in how you're doing development. Git work trees are really cool, and they're really, really awesome with AI, especially if you're using multi-agent AI. But we're at not really in the scope of this walkthrough. All right, and so it's done. It looks like that's surprising. So we come up here, and so again, this is so I said go do it. thought for 12 seconds. Doing a bunch of stuff. Here's all the files that it edited, and it's by default will set up, it'll set up to open all the files that it edited, so you can come in here and see. So again, like it got rid of this, it added some code. So if you're really interested in the code and you want to follow along, you can. It's pretty easy. You know, it just each tab here is a different document. It's pretty easy. You can kind of see there's visual indicators over here to kind of skim through what it's changed. Anyone who's done code before, you know, this is pretty standard kind of diff stuff. But if you're interested, you know, you can come in here and copy and paste it over and be like, why did you change this? What does it do? What does it mean? You know, if you don't understand it, and it'll explain it to you. So verifying local account. So it's trying to kind of troubleshoot and walk through some stuff. It looks like it tried to run it. So this is running a command on my computer via the command line, and it's running Flutter analyze a bunch of stuff. So what it did is it made some changes, and then it ran the Flutter analyze to see what's going on. And so then this is the output of that command here. There's some different views down here you can look at as well. But so it's going through. It's obviously we can see some errors and warnings. So it found that, and so then it went on next to say, you know, checking for the command status. I've hit a snag, so it's acknowledging that there's some issues. So it's going back through and refactoring. This is all part of development. If you were working with a human or you were doing this yourself, you're going to make some changes, you're going to run it, and you're going to think it's going to work. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then you get a bug or an error, and then you have to go back and try to figure out what the heck happened, right? So it looks like it did a little bit of that. There's some more debugging here. It's going through and checking some stuff. Looks like it's still going. And so we're on step 14 of the iterative process. So it's going to keep modifying stuff, keep checking stuff, and the check condition that it has for the settings screen here. So that's this. Is to make sure that the changes that it's making are compatible with the coding requirements for Dart and Flutter. And then there's also a bunch of checks and validations that this app will run to make sure that it works before you even get it in the simulator here. So it's just doing that. This can take seconds, it can take minutes. Typically doesn't take hours, but sometimes depending upon what kind of bugs you're hitting or what you're trying to do, it can take a long time. So hopefully this doesn't take more than a few more minutes. This change, while seemingly simple, of just effectively adding a new button down here for local account, and then hiding some of this stuff and some of this stuff, and then having it work, seems like it should be a pretty easy change. The reality is it's really not an easy change. It's actually pretty complicated. There's a lot of possibility for stuff to go wrong. So that's one reason I wanted to do this, because I'm sure we're going to find some bugs and we'll work through them. Or it'll just work and then we'll be done and I can go eat dinner. So let's look up here. So it's still going through. And we're on step 22, it looks like. So it's still looking at the push-pull syncs. Okay, yeah. So if you have any questions or things kind of come up as we go, feel free to hit the chat. I'll try to kind of do chat. I am from the US. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. Good morning in India. Big fan, bro. I don't know if I quite follow that. I'm gonna just be focusing on this for folks. But yeah, if folks want to go check it out, not an endorsement, but you know, don't run code you don't trust. Right. And for people looking at this in the future, I might cut down some of this out of real time, but we're just gonna wait. So if you wanna go grab a beverage or use the restroom, this might be a good time. I have no idea how long this will take. I would assume it would be 5 or 10 minutes. So you'll notice, earlier there was like 191 issues, up here. I don't know if it's still, yeah, it's, we don't have the, I think it's here. No, it's the code. But we're down to 70. It's kind of hard to read this sometimes because it'll update in real time. But we had 190 some issues, and now we're down to 72. So it's actually making progress. So it might look like it's looping through. And to some extent, it actually is looping through, but it's trying different things to get rid of all these different errors. When you start getting into like loops like this, sometimes it does help to stop it and start a new window. I tend to let them run until it finishes its conclusion, unless it runs for 20, 30 minutes and I'm looking at it. It's obviously not making progress, or sometimes it does get hung up on specific details. Um, but then yeah, it's interesting. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read through, see what it's doing. Yeah, it's really struggling on the settings piece. Um, but typically, like I said, let it run. If you have other models down here, sometimes other models work better. We'll wait for it to finish and we can kind of start working through some of the troubleshooting. But just generally speaking, it's good to give it outcomes at that point to say, when I click on settings and click add user, it doesn't work. It gives me this error. It should do this, those kinds of things, instead of trying to tell it specifics of what to do and what not to do. You can do that. For example, if you wanted the save and sync button to be like blue or red or yellow, go tell it to do that. But when it comes to like design decisions or to coding decisions, like unless you have specific reasons to do something in a certain way, it's sometimes best to just let it kind of, at least the first pass, to let it kind of work through based on what it knows and try to get to the outcome that you've given it versus trying to give it a detailed step and plan of what to do. Sometimes you need to give it a detailed plan, or sometimes you're just trying to do something and it's just easier for you to just tell it what to do. But for folks, if you're not into coding or you're trying this for the first time, um, I would advise you to stick to outcomes. And we'll get into that here once it's done. It's interesting that it created a walkthrough. So typically walkthroughs are created once it's done. Um, we can see that it's still generating. It's waiting for this command. I don't know why it waited 300 seconds when it's clearly done, but it makes crazy decisions sometimes. But the walkthrough document, once it's actually done, it'll give you a summary of what's done, and then like usually some kind of validations or testing. So it's actually kind of wrote us a test script, which is interesting. It's this verification, no new units. So it likes to use this as a excuse as well to not build more tests in. But I would say, just kind of glancing at these, this is probably most of the right stuff to be testing. What I would do to test this is run the app with a sync account, sign it up, do all that kind of stuff. And then make sure stuff works, and then erase the simulator so we know we don't have anything in there, and then do a local account and test that to make sure that it works. Typically, you don't have to do that for major changes or even big things, but because we're changing the core structure effectively of the app, uh, that's a big change. Like I said, so like in theory, it seems like we're just adding a button and we're adding local um, ability, and it should just be a few files here and there, and to some extent it is, but everything in the app has been predicated up until this point for having sync account and a server available. So it's going to be pretty interesting, I think, to see what happens. And looks like it's still waiting for this for some reason. So it's clearly like stuck. It's probably been more than 300 seconds. I haven't been timing it. But you will run into this sometimes when it's debugging. Like clearly it's finished and it's hung up. So what I'll do is I'll hit the stop button down there. This is going to tell me all the files that it changed. And so I'll just accept these changes, and then I'll just tell it to resume. And so then it should be able to pick back up on what it was doing here at step 41. Sometimes it gets stuck again and we have to get more creative, but typically it'll come back through, look at its stuff, and then figure out why it got stuck and move forward. So it looks like it's figured out how to get unstuck. And it's still trying to troubleshoot why the screen is throwing issues. I'd say typically, like my standard workflow, again, I'm doing this in a more simplistic way than I would do normally. Um, I'm not typically watching what's going on here. If it doesn't work or it does get, sometimes it will just tell you like, I don't know what to do. I can't figure it out. I'll go through and debrief it, but I'm usually using multiple different agents at this point to do different things. And maybe we can talk through that a little bit. Oh, let's see what it does. 73. So we've created a new issue. If you hit Command E, these are a bunch of different spaces, but you'll see here, this is, this is what we're working on. And you can run different conversations in different folders or different coding projects. And so this is a little bit of a different view. And it's a lot easier to work across different agents in in more of an agentic model. Or if you're working on multiple different things, you can do that through here as well. So it's a little bit easier to kind of run. So you're not running just this window. This is you'll get the plan documents, that kind of stuff we saw in here as well. This, has the code in here too. So if you're into coding, obviously it's probably going to be where you're at, or if you're interested in that. But you can also run it just through the agent manager, and that might be even easier for you if you just don't care about the code. Like it'll show you here on the screen what it's doing in code land. But if you're not really interested or don't care, you can just ignore it, and then it'll present you the document when it's finished. It looks like it's making progress. So there we go. So now it's starting to understand that looks like it's trying to patch some stuff. Drastic rewrite of build method. I'm going to replace that's probably not good. Multivariate shot. Method. So it might actually be creating more work for itself than it needs to. This is one of the, experiment fun kind of things to see. This is where I probably start to use my human brain pretty soon if it's not done, because it doesn't look like. It's going to kind of parse through what's going on here. I don't care about the warnings and the infos right now. I'm trying to figure out, so it looks like it's really trying to dial into the settings here. I'm going to try really hard not to use my human brain. Because again, I'm assuming most people probably don't know a lot about what's going on here, and that's okay. But I think it's a great. So now we're down to 64. Great, we've made progress down from 72 to then 76 to 64. And I think this is a good example of something too, because it seems like it should be easy, like we said, right? So it's I'm coming over here. We're just adding a button. That can't be hard, right? It should just be a local account. I shouldn't need a server. That should be easy, right? Well, it's actually a little bit more involved than it might appear to be, and that's part of this learning process. In that, what we're doing here is kind of complicated. Actually, we're refactoring pretty much the whole app from scratch. Um, there's quite a bit of features in here too that are dependent on this working. So it'll be really interesting to see how much stuff actually gets broken once this is done. But we're starting to make progress again, which is good. Um, and I think this is a great example of, just because something seems simple doesn't mean it is. And you'll start to figure that out, especially if you don't really understand coding. That's fine. Just be aware that you might think something is easy, or something appears to be straightforward, and it turns out not to be. I didn't think this was going to take this much time. Um, yeah, it's really interesting that it keeps kind of screwing up the syntax, it looks like, and there's throwing a lot of errors. Um, oh, there we go. It's interesting because this is the kind of stuff that I don't typically see it struggle with. Um, but working with AI, you never really know what you're going to find sometimes. I'm just going to accept changes here and make sure that there's not some weird thing caught in a buffer. But yeah, it's really doing a lot of nested stuff. And as you can see, this is a 1,000-line file, which is quite a bit of code for a thing. And then this is all of our, screens basically here. And this is defining everything, that we're seeing here as well, and how when I click on a button, stuff works. So it's the core of the app. So I did not expect that it was going to go easy, but I am a little surprised that it's getting tripped up on some of the things that it is. But sometimes it really crushes it, and sometimes it doesn't. This is all part of the experience trying to code with AI. Or I guess I wouldn't even say I'm really coding with AI. It's part of the experience of having AI code for you. All right, we have another person from India on the stream. Hey, from America. I think it's morning. Good morning. Good day, I guess. So folks are joining. We're building in a big feature with AI. I'm having AI do most of the work. I'm trying not to do too much experiential work with this. I'm assuming that most people are going to want to just download the source code for this and throw it in and kind of get going, or they're trying to do an app from scratch and it's more about strategies on troubleshooting or different ways of thinking in AI context instead of just like kind of knowing what to do. So I'm going to try hard not to just dive in and do stuff. We're waiting for it to work through the implementation plan that we approved. So in anti-gravity, it'll plan everything you do. And I told it that I wanted to have local only accounts here. And so the app has a sync account built in. But I wanted people to be able to use it who don't have an account. And so it's effectively having to refactor the whole app. That's what it's doing. You might not understand that, but that's what it's basically doing. We started with it was like 190 some issues that it had the first time it tried to run the Dart Flutter analyze. We're down to 25, it looks like now. So it is making progress. It's taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. But I'm just going to keep kind of accepting the changes as it goes here and then see how long it takes to make some progress. Give it a pretty simple prompt. What I'll try to do at the end is give the example of the prompt and maybe try to pull up the implementation plan so folks can kind of see. But one thing I really love about anti-gravity is that it gives you a little bit more of an English-friendly surface to use versus having to understand code or having to define a bunch of logic. You can come in here and then in English, just add comments, ask questions, tell it what to do. You can also do that in a little chat window here, but this feels like a much more natural process, especially if you're used to working online. So, it's got quite a bit of stuff we're doing. We did throw out some curveballs. So there's a listening stats method, I guess, that we run that pulls information from the server. All the listening history is on the server and we crunch it locally on the app. I said, hey, let's include that with the local account too. So that's probably part of this. I'm not paying too close of attention here to what it's doing. It doesn't look like it's got there quite yet, but that's going to be part of the complications. As with any development, we had like 25 issues. Now we're back up to 46. And so that doesn't necessarily mean things are better or worse necessarily. It could just mean that something is broken in a way that breaks more other things. And literally, as I say that, it says it's done. We'll see, right? So anyway, so that's where we're at. Now we're going to look at the walkthrough. So if I come down here to my little, I don't know what that is, drawer, these are all the documents that it's creating for us to look at. So I'll click on that walkthrough. And then this is going to give us a summary of what it did and then steps to verify what happened. And so everybody who's probably like, hey, great, it worked. Well, it says it's done. It says it works. That's where we have to human. You never really know what it lies about and what it doesn't. So, all right, let's just quick look at this document and see what it says. So this document outlines pretty straightforward. Local account, settings screen, added local account, toggle for creating without a server. Great, that's what we said we were going to do. Provided or updates. We're going to update these things. So this is basically just saying that, well, you know what? Here's an example. I'll ask it what it means. Again, I'm trying to not use my, I'm trying to approach this from a perspective that someone might not know anything really what's going on. So I don't know really what that means. Maybe I'm concerned. I see the GPod or API. I don't know what that is. So we'll see what it says. Okay, that's good. So this is what it was running over here, and we were seeing kind of spinning with all the issues and errors. So it was basically just making sure that the syntax and everything is fine. There are some tests already in the code base. Because of the nature of the iOS environment, that kind of stuff, like testing is a little bit limited to what you can do in Dart or Flutter. Um, so then this is the feature overview. So if you're building multiple things, you could definitely build multiple things, like, right? So when we have that task list, I could have given it 5 or 10 or 15 different things to build. It would come up with a strategy to do that and go do it. So you don't have to limit it to one thing. I'm trying to keep the scope simple and also timely. But yeah, and then the verification steps, I'm just going to glance at these, but that looks pretty good. Okay, so it says it's done, right? We're good to go. Not so quite so fast. So I'm going to go over to Xcode, and then I'm going to hit this little play button, and we're going to see what happens. And so what this is going to do is we built the project and we've done all the code changes in Flutter. And so this is going to compile it now for iOS. And as you saw there, it said build failed. So this is pretty common building with AI. AI will tell you that it did stuff and it doesn't always work. And so there could be a lot of different reasons for that. A lot of times, maybe the code in Flutter land is right, but something now broke in the Xcode world of ways of running things, or in the iOS specific world, right? And so nice thing with Xcode is it'll tell you this little red X here is our error, so I can click on that. Command phase script execution failed with non-zero Xcode. Well, what the heck does that mean? So I'll just literally click on it. I'll do the command copy and I'll just throw it over here and I'll just tell it. And then this is what I would recommend doing as you run into issues with AI code is if you get, this is a really generic error message, and well, generic-ish, I guess. But you could figure this out on your own through Xcode if you wanted. But what it's going to do now is it knows roughly what this means, and it's now coming through here and starting to analyze all the different files in our folder. And oh no, this isn't an attribute thing. Yeah. And so it's doing a bunch of analysis again, quick. And so this high level, the way security permissions are done in OS 10, there's some weird bugs that I've been encountering with Dart in the latest Mac OS version. And so some of that, it looks like it's related to this. So it'll tell you what it did here. So I did all this stuff. And so it's not always going to generate these documents that we've been reading over here. Sometimes it'll just kind of vibe with you over here and then the chat window. But then it's going to tell us, so this means the code, blah, 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 blah. It's okay. There's no server connection. Okay, so it says it's okay, right? So we'll go back over here and hit play again, see what happens. And so then this is going to go through and build, and we're having the same problem. I'm going to just clear the local cache just to make sure it's not some stupid cache thing. You can do that with Command-Shift-K, and that'll just blow away all this. When it builds the project to run in the simulator, it builds a bunch of stuff and caches stuff, and in theory, refreshes everything you need. Sometimes you run into issues that it doesn't do. I don't think it's going to fix it, but before we just go round and round and round, I'm just going to do that. And so you'll see now that the build up here takes much longer because we've gotten rid of a lot of that other work we've done. Nope, still have that issue. So I'm going to give it a little bit more context since it's the same issue again. Oftentimes I'll use my human brain when I'm getting the same thing twice, but again, we're just going to assume we don't know a lot about code, or we're depending heavily on the AI to do that. So I'll put it in there, but then I'm going to give it some more information saying that getting the issue when running, the build fails. And so now it's cleaning the Flutter. It's trying to re-get the packages. Let's see if it builds. So now instead of building it with Xcode, it's building it with Flutter, which you can do. I like to build it through Xcode because it saves a little bit of a step. And then I just get it in my simulator. So it looks like it's probably going to work. And so again, remember I said I cleaned the cache in Xcode, but there's all sorts of other different pieces of software in this tool chain. And so reinstalling pods. So the Cocoa pods are part of the iOS, macOS ecosystem. When you do a lot of changes, sometimes you need to either update libraries or you need to rebuild different parts of the caches and that kind of stuff. That's kind of done. It looks like it did the same thing here with the Flutter cache. We again the extended attributes. I was talking about. There's a kind of a known bug in that, and then it's asking me to retry and see if it fails. So if you've worked with Flutter, you worked at Dart, this is all probably super common stuff. You'll figure out also pretty quickly that just doing it yourself oftentimes saves you a little bit of time, and then running it in Xcode. But again, we're going to assume that we don't maybe know that, or we forgot, or this is like the second time we've tried it. So yeah, we're building again. This is where we cross our fingers and hope it doesn't do it again, and it did. So I think I'll give it one more time here to fail. I guess good time too. So this is the errors that will prevent the code from actually running. The issues over here, these are warnings. Sometimes they matter. Sometimes they can help give it context as well. And so we'll wait for it to try to troubleshoot this again. It's trying to build it. So it's building in Flutter. It looks like just fine. It's interesting now it's running it in verbose to see what the issues are. Sometimes the build project itself is the problem. In the code, it's actually correct or works well underneath. That's part of the negative with part of the negatives with this. It adds complexity, and Flutter is great because it gives us the flexibility to work and build for multiple devices and operating systems, but that also then adds some complexity when we get into kind of stuff like this. So it looks like it's found some more issues, which is good. So now it's trying to just use Flutter again to just build for iOS. It's not signing it, so it's assuming that there might be an issue code signing. Probably not, but that's a good troubleshooting step. And then it's doing the verbose flag, which is going to give way more information than it normally would. And then it's putting that into a log and it's going to check that. So that's kind of a clever way of looking at what the issues are without having to see it. Because again, it's not able to actually read the terminal like we can. It's looking at the outputs. It can read the text. It can synthesize the text, but it can't actually see what's happening. So it has to do some. So here again, it's looking at that output and it's looking at the last 20 lines to see what's happening. Looks like it's a bunch of warnings. And maybe at this point, you've decided that you don't want to build stuff with AI. And that's okay. I would say if you're running into these problems, if you're starting this from scratch, it just can't work. The best tip I can give is try to maybe start over and try to make it even simpler. So again, this is dependent on server sync functionality. And we've changed a very large part of the app. Probably not the best first project to start out with, but maybe that's something you really want. You really, really want to use the YourPods app, and you don't have a server. You don't want to put up a server. You don't understand that. You just want to use it locally. And so you think AI can come in and help do it, and it will get there. But sometimes things take longer or more difficult than they are, and we have to just keep trying some stuff until we get it to work. And that's a lot of software development. That's the creative process. All right, we fixed it again. You notice the common theme here of AI continuously tells us we're done. Important to make sure we change or accept the changes. I'm going to come over here. I'm just gonna hit play again, see what happens. Okay, so it says the please script execution error was actually masking a Dart compiling error. Interesting. The server profile class was missing several fields that were being used in the code. I've updated that to include those fields. So what I'm assuming it did, we could look, but what I'm assuming it did is it removed a bunch of fields that were required. I think I said that before. So these fields are actually required in the app. So you have to have a web or a server URL, you have to have a username, you have to have a password in order to sync, right? So we've required that in the app. So if it stripped that out and made it for local and it said it was going to hide it, then those fields are still required, but there's no way to actually use them. And so Dart probably is caught that as part of the compiling, was part of the Flutter process, because you can't interact with it. So it probably failed it. Same issue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to the command line. I'm in the folder, and I'm just going to build it myself with Flutter to see what's going on, if that'll give us some more more information. And then, so of course, we can obviously read and see what this is going on. It's a little bit easier for us to parse information out of this as well. So if we get a bunch of issues and a bunch of errors, I can just copy and paste those back into the screen over here, because it's trying to do this itself, but sometimes it just doesn't see things or doesn't quite understand, or something will happen. And so this is a strategy that you can use without having to dive into the code. I hope we don't have to get to that part, but we might. So great, we have an error encountered while building for device. And so there's a bunch of warnings here. There's a bunch of different code errors. And so what I would recommend doing is we come up here and I just highlight fail to build app. I'll just copy and paste this whole thing into the window. And usually it says, aha, I found the issue, and then it'll do some more. By doing this, we also we start to run into context issues. And context is the amount of information that you can feed to the model, or how much like a conversation can how much information a conversation can change. And so typically a few of these aren't bad, but you'll start to see that it just really spins, has a hard time. There's some really cool features with anti-gravity. Claude Code does this too, but there's I'll call it memory and quotes, that gives the model the ability to kind of hack some of those limits, and also be able to pick up on things where it's left off. And so we'll do a round or two of this. If this doesn't work, then what I'd probably do is I'll start a new conversation, and then start from the compiling issue and say something along the lines of, we made some changes to the app, we're trying to compile it, it doesn't work, help me out, kind of thing, and then give it the error code, which will sometimes help it unstick or give it enough new context to be able to operate some more. So yeah, so that's what happened. Again, it totally works now, right? We're fine. So I'm going to actually just run this again from the command line. We're just going to try to build it again, see what happens. Let's see, this is a step that can take a long time if you have a slower computer, or if you're on like a MacBook Air or something. Like, you can still do all this stuff, it'll just take a little bit longer. So just be aware that, this is going to operate pretty fast, but it could take some time. It's also part of development. That's why a lot of people prefer faster machines or working on server architecture, that kind of stuff, to get out of these limitations. But if you're just kind of clicking around or trying to do some stuff, experiment, it's totally fine what you have. Great. So it looks like it built. Come back over to Xcode here. I'll hit the go button, and we'll see if the project actually builds for the simulator. And so I did close the simulator. You don't have to. It'll launch it for us automatically, but I actually did it to kind of free up a little bit of resources. It doesn't take a lot to run, but every little second counts sometimes, especially when I'm waiting for dinner. So see what goes here. And again, we're building, so it'll take a minute or two to get built. All right, simulator starting up. Try to put it over here. So it says it's installing. It's interesting that we're still getting like the loading screen. This might be a simulator. Okay, so we'll go flick over here. There we go. So it's launching the runner. So usually it just launches the app for you. There it is. Okay, so this should be the new version of the app now that we've built. It's a little slow and everything kind of has to get loaded into memory. So we'll give it a second here to kind of catch up. We'll go to our accounts. I don't see. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Sync account. So this would be the normal flow, or the flow that the old flow. You know, that looks good. From again, we should really check, make sure all this stuff works still, because it's all dependent on it. Theoretically, it should again. And then we have a local account. So account name, device ID, text. So it kept, remember it said it was going to get rid of the sync interval and it didn't. So that's something that it kind of lied about. Background app refresh, podcast search, privacy stats, local account mode, syncing is disabled. So it did get rid of the buttons like it said it would, but it didn't get rid of the sync interval. So again, remember it told us over here that it did. And this is part of working with AI. Sometimes it does stuff, sometimes it doesn't. So again, you always have to use your brain. You can't necessarily trust everything 100% of the time. Yeah. So let's create a local account. So YourPods was designed from day one to be multi-account compatible. So you can have multiple GPod or sync accounts if you wanted. So that's probably part of why this works as well as it theoretically does. So I'm going to do local account. Device ID doesn't really matter for the local account. I'm trying to think through in the future. What I'll probably do for the future is that if you have a local account and then want to migrate that account to a sync account, be able to do that. But you don't need a device ID for a local account, because that's how your device is identified to the server to sync. You get multiple devices. So that we'll probably want to change that, get rid of that, or default that to something. And then we get rid of that sync interval because it doesn't really matter. But we'll create local account. It's interesting. So the podcast I was listening to is still there, even though it shouldn't be, right? So there's a bug. Looks like there's a GUI bug with that. So there's local. So it's still picking up on my logged in server profile, which is interesting, right? So that's pretty broken. Oh, interesting. So we have a local. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to delete both of these out of the queue and see if it removes it from my local queue as well. So we'll go back to that account. Okay, so yeah, so then if I come in here and say library, I'll search for my favorite podcast. Add that, subscribe. So it looks like it adds it to my library. And then let's go back in time here. And then I'll just add this to my queue. And we'll see that it works. Okay, so it's in my queue. But if I go to my non-local account, it's in my queue. So we're getting there, right? We've made some progress. It kind of works, but we're having some issues with it reading what's going on. This might also be because this simulator has local data already, and depending upon how the app updates were done, it could be just reading from the local, like, cached version of the app. So one thing I'll do before we get too crazy here is I'm just going to stop it. I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to come up here under device and erase all content and settings. So I'm just going to, because this is a simulator I've been using for, I think, since I started building stuff. So it's just like, refreshing the device, making sure that there's nothing that's remaining from the old accounts or anything like that on there before we really start diving into some troubleshooting. But we'll give it a second here to refresh. And then if it's still an issue, we're going to go back to AI and we're going to make AI do it. So as it's going, I'm going to get ready because I think the problem is actually the app and not the simulator. But that's part of troubleshooting. That's something you'll learn very quickly when you're doing, especially in the simulator world. The Apple simulator is pretty good, but it's not perfect. And you run into all sorts of weird, quirky things that you don't get on the actual app itself, like installed on your phone. So that's part of it. Oh, I wonder too. As I was typing out to the AI, I'm wondering if the device name actually is still being used for like local storage. So if the way everything is being stored in the profile is actually keyed to the profile somehow, it's just picking up on that same. So if the both device names are the same in both accounts, you would get the same information sunk from the server, right? So something's still broken, but I'm wondering if that's it. So again, I'm going to try not to like know that for this test. Installing the app. But I'll give it a little bit more generalized troubleshooting to see kind of what it does here. But let's give it a second to load it up. Okay, so again, this is a brand new app now. We don't have any of the baggage that we had on there before. So I'm going to go add an account. I get the message, so we need to remove that message, right? Or actually, I probably won't. I won't remove it, but I'll add it in our prompt here to say, so this is where, let's force quit the app. And so this is how I would probably normally do this actually, is I would just launch the app, who's listening. So when I click add an account, So what I did there is I said, I gave it a little bit of specific instruction, but also general, saying that when I add an account, I get this screen, right? We need to change the message to reflect the local account, so it's not aware of that. Sorry. So it's changed the settings screen, it's changed the account screen, but this pop-up is technically a different screen within Flutter, in Flutter, if we really want to talk through that. But it didn't know that, or it didn't find it, or thought it was irrelevant. Whatever happened, it didn't change it. But from a user perspective, this sucks, because it's like, oh, I bought this thing and I thought I could use a local account, and it's telling me I can't. I'm confused. So we have to use our brain now to instruct it on what to do. I didn't give it very good instructions, but it'll be interesting to see what it does. So I'm going to go over to local account. I'm going to give it, I'm going to change this to create. So there should be nothing in here. Cool. So I'm going to come in here again. It's for my favorite podcast. Subscribe. Okay. Here's all the episodes. So I'm going to say, let's play this next, and then add to queue. It's picking up on that.
Understand your perspective a bit more.
Okay, so I'm hearing it. I don't know if you hear it at home there, but I definitely hear the episode playing. We're getting the episode information. There's a weird bug with this, with chapters. The chapters should be displaying here. It works.
We are live
on device.
We're early,
but for some reason the simulator has problems with that. Okay, so that's cool. And then if I come over to my in progress, there they are. So that seems to work. Let's force quit the app, make sure it stays there when we come back in. Library, okay. In progress, if I click
we are live. Hello.
Right, and I hear it again. Okay, so the app seems to work locally, right? There's no syncing happening. It, again, the settings is a little, we need to clean up some of the settings. So I'm going to tell it about our sync problem. Okay, so I just made a couple notes. I said mostly works, created a local account, but changes the account reflect the sync account like we were seeing earlier. Sync interval is still present for local account and doesn't need to be. Again, that's this thing here. And then let's default the device ID to local just to make it a little bit cleaner. I'll probably dive into that a little bit. I do think it needs to probably be present, and at some point I would like to do a migration again. So if you have a local account, migrate to a sync account, but so that works. I am still a little interested into why we were seeing the data. Oh, that's why. So if I change it here, it's going to change it here. So it just copied those fields, but it didn't make them unique. And so that probably means then to the user settings. Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting bug. I'm trying not to think about it. But I observed that. So I'm going to call it fair game. So when I say local and I come over to sync account, so let's tell it that. So I think that's why we were seeing the behavior earlier, because the device ID was the same. I think it's picking up on it's basically cloned everything. And so it's actually, it looks like it's changing, but it's not. For folks who've developed stuff before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we'll see if I can figure it out. So again, I started a new chat with it. And what I'll probably do is give it some context. we just made, or we just added So give it the context. We just added a local account feature. There's some issues. It will probably go look at the other account or the other chat that we had going to kind of suss out what's going on. But then again, we'll go do that. And so now it's going to kick it off again, and it's going to come up with a whole new different kind of plan. So I would say this is a success. Oh, I didn't tell it about that. And I would maybe give it like a B- for the first attempt. So again, it was the first run. It took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but it mostly works. But there's this obvious issue, and I would say for most, like, would I ship this? Probably not. However, though, if you were just trying to use this at home, should work for you, right? Because you don't have a sync account. It doesn't matter if this is the behavior or not, because I'm gonna ship this to other people. There's some work to be done here, but we're going to go a little bit longer. Let's see what it does in this next round, if it can figure out most of the stuff or not. And then I'm probably going to go eat some dinner, but I won't leave you hanging here. So we'll let it think for a little bit to figure out what's going on. You can also give it screenshots. So like, in the, with this, so this is the simulator telling us that there's some kind of padding problem. So you can just take a screenshot of this, paste it in there, and say this is the issue that I'm seeing. You can also see that the delete icon is overlapping the local account icon. So remember, it told us it was going to delineate that for us in the account switcher here. But it did it kind of wrong. So we just, it's just probably mostly cosmetic stuff it'll figure out. Okay. So this is open from our last chat. So this is what it's going to do. It looks like sync interval conflict will be hidden, local account, preventing state bleeding between the account. Oh, perfect. That's what we need to do. I'm just going to read this quick. Look. Yep. So this is kind of what I was saying earlier, and I kind of stopped because I'm trying not to poison the process too much by knowing what's going on. But it's the windows that we have here, or the setting windows that we have. This is actually basically the same account in the logic of what's going on behind the scenes, and it's not different. And so it's picked up on that. It looks like still reading through it, and so it'll switch that over. All right, so we're going to say go. So it's going to change our welcome dialog. It's going to change this. There's a little bit of a note there, so it's interesting that it picked up on changing like the language and not the functionality. Hide sync interval. Cool. So we'll give this a second to, oh, there we go. So when we delete the accounts now, it's delete app only, app and server. That's new. That's cool. So I said app and server. So there's another bug. So when I click on delete for the local account, I say app and server. Well, I can't delete the server account because this is a local URL for just the app. So we'd want to change that also. And I'm going to just go ahead and wipe the simulator again, just to make sure we don't have any local files behind the scenes that are going to cause us issues when we test the new build of this. All right, so here's what we did. Smart device ID, device defaults to local. So I asked it to do that. It's interesting that it didn't really talk about the seeing the information changing between accounts. So we'll see if that's still an issue or not. All right. And then as the simulator's starting, we can, I'm just going to clean the build folder, and then let's see if it will work. Oops. And so this is the process that you'll get used to with any sort of development. If you're new, is you think you did something and it did it in a different way, or there's something that was not necessarily anticipated. You'll find, I think, as you do more work with AI, the right sizing the instructions that you give it really does matter, and will definitely tune the amount of problems that you encounter. Again, I'm trying to approach this from a perspective of somebody who, doesn't necessarily know how to code or doesn't know the ins and outs of software development, but wants to try the process out, or wants to make some modifications to this app or another app. You can do this with anything you can find on GitHub. You can bring it onto your computer and open it up in anti-gravity and ask it, what is it? What does this do? How do I, do X, Y, or Z, and then start to work through it. All right, we're building away here. You might hear my computer in the background. It's starting to get sad. It's hot. All right, so we're just waiting for a few more build tasks, and then we'll see it pop up in the simulator, and I expect it to be better. So you notice that the initial change of building out the local from the server sync profiles took a long time. I mean, that took probably 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. The subsequent changes are much quicker. That took a couple of minutes, actually taking longer to rebuild the code than it did to actually make the changes. And so it depends what you're trying to do, how complicated it is, how good the code base is, how good the application design is. But again, if you want to try this out, I highly recommend you just go check it out and try it. And so we're still building, it looks like. Here we go. I'm also, live streaming from the same computer here that we're using to build. So resources are a little bit less than there would probably be normally. Okay, so it looks like it's done. There it is. It's installing on the simulator. Again, it usually takes a second or two for everything to kind of catch up. We're running a bunch of debugging stuff, of course, in the background too. So stuff takes a little bit longer than it would on just a regular build. All right, so we should see a different notification here. Yep, YourPods is designed to work best with GPod or compatible server like Nextcloud, but you can also use it locally without syncing. Great, that's what I want to do. So I want to hit that local account. Create YourPods local. It got rid of our sync thing down here. These are all still applicable to the local, and it's telling us that syncing is disabled. So that's cool. And you notice that it put it where those buttons are. So if you're coming from a synced account to a local account, you're gonna, oh yeah, I don't have them because it's so, it's kind of intuited a little bit there. YourPods local, I'm gonna call this 2 just to see if it changes in the sync account, which it shouldn't. Interesting. For some reason, I can't click back to sync account. So maybe it's separated them. So I guess once you make the decision, you're screwed. Technically, probably not a bug. But this is one of those things where, again, we've got kind of this weird condition. So, oh no, I accidentally click local. How do I get back? Well, it doesn't appear that I can. So I'm going to force quit the app. I found another bug by using the software, right? So click add. Yep. Okay, and then I'm going to click local. It seems like once I make a determination, I'm locked in. Well, that's kind of a shitty user experience, right? If I do the other way, does it lock me in? Interesting. So it defaults us to this, which is correct. But then when I click local account, we're locked into local now. So we'll need to change that too. Oops. I'll just leave the rest of it default, create local account. Again, appears to be working. Let's switch accounts real quick. So we're still having that issue. So I'm just going to use my screenshot tool here. And I'll just take a screenshot of and you want to give it a little bit of context of, where it's at in the window. Come down here, just copy that, paste it over here, and I'll say, this looks broken. And remember, we had that delete bug. So when I click on delete, when I click app and server, I get an issue, right? So the account clicking. So when I click delete, I get an error. What I'll probably do is I'll just take a screenshot of that. Oops. So I'll just grab a quick screenshot. So the error is probably not a big deal, but we shouldn't display it to the user, right? That's kind of a shitty experience. So when I'm trying to delete it, one, it doesn't delete, and two, I get that error. So what I should say then is I should say when I delete the local account, so what I'm doing is a process where I describe the problem, but then I also describe the outcome. So the account should delete and we should suppress the error is what I actually want to happen. And it usually picks up on it, but it's usually much better to tell it what you actually want to get done. So come over here. Again, we'll search for my favorite podcast. Add that. I subscribed. Have this. Let's see if we can download. I'll download, so it looks like it's working. I'm going to add that to queue. I'm going to add this to play next. Appears to be downloaded, right? That's cool. So I'll pop over here to my in progress queue, get my little notification. Downloaded, right? That's cool. So it looks like there might be a bug there too. My assumption is that it's downloaded.
Hello.
So I clicked play. I can hear it playing. If you might not be able to hear it. So again, it's better, but we're getting some unknown issues that we weren't anticipating. Just that's part of software development. So what I would continue doing here is working these kind of one at a time, and like this is a combined issue, so I'll just probably send that in here to the agent and let it work on it. But for some of this other stuff, I'd probably spin up a new chat and do that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to do this. Again, there's some bugs here to fix. I'm going to continue working on those and get them fixed up. And again, I highly recommend giving the outcome to the chat as you go. Hopefully, I know this maybe took a while. You'll be able to skip through with chapters and stuff if you made it to the end here. I appreciate it. But hopefully it doesn't look too daunting. It again will give you some targets, hopefully, to as you struggle to get CocoaPods installed and get Flutter installed and get anti-gravity and get the code downloaded and deal with the certificate issues and all this kind of stuff. You can also use the AI to help you with that along the way. So I'd highly recommend probably order is to, download the code, download anti-gravity, open the code in anti-gravity, make sure you have Xcode, you need Xcode tools. There's all these different dependencies of stuff you'll need to do. Do those, use anti-gravity or AI to help you again, Claude Code. There's all sorts of other ways to do this, but try it, right? Try to build something, try to modify something. For YourPods specifically, if you want to, again, make some changes and you think other people are interested, feel free to open a PR on the repo and we'll take a look. And if we think other people use them, we'll integrate it too. It's open source. That's how it works. Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to go grab some dinner and I'm looking forward to the next time we do this. If you want to see more of this, feel free to comment. Let us know. We've gotten a lot of feedback. Nathan and I have been chatting about how to do a little bit more of a tutorial or a detailed process so that you can follow along on the specific steps and maybe glean some more information. Again, this is just kind of a high level, assume you don't really know a lot, assume you can persevere through the issues to get set up and going and do some cool stuff. So happy building, everyone. And